This antique dining set looked beautiful until the first dinner party right after it was brought home from the store. Hi, I'm Karen and I love to teach upholstery, so stick with me and we'll see what we can do. There are 8 cushions in this project, and we're going to see if we can use a lot fewer staples than the previous upholsterer used. We're going to start by taking off the cambric or dust cover. There are 3 more layers to take off after the dust cover. The second layer is a cardboard tack strip that was stapled over the welt cording, which is stapled over the decorative fabric. These staples are sideways and should be parallel to the edge. Staples are super strong and it's unnecessary to have so many. When you are upholstering many dining chairs and you want them all to look the same, a pattern is made to easily and quickly cut fabric. If there is a pattern in the fabric, we pick the most pleasing point for the center. Best practice is to make sure you and your customer agree where the center is and write that in your work order, attaching a sample of the fabric to the order. If you've done any other types of sewing, you may recognize these markings. I've marked the center of the chair's seat front, which is where your knees sit on the seat, and the back that sits between the back rails. These marks help us to easily attach the seat pieces completely straight. The grain line is simply an extension of the 2 center marks. I use a ruler to measure from the selvage or finished edge to the grain line in 2 places. One at the top and one at the bottom. With an equal measurement, I know the fabric will be perfectly aligned. Here you can see all 8 chair pieces cut. I've also marked on the pattern nap. The nap shows the direction that the fabrics like this chenille or a velvet have. The nap goes with the smoothness of the fabric when you run your hand over it, like petting a dog or a cat. If you go against the nap, you will be scruffing up your pet's fur. If you mix the nap with some pieces going up and some pieces going down, you can get a completely different color, simply based on how the light shines on it. I check and see how the pieces are perfectly matching, but I have a problem. I cut all the pieces to the pattern I made for the regular dining chairs, but the 2 armchairs are a little bit deeper. There's no way to fix this problem except to cut 2 bigger pieces from a slightly longer pattern. Here you can see we're cutting 4-inch bands for the sides of the chairs. Because it took an hour to clean off all the old staples and fabric from one chair seat, it's good not to do more than a couple of hours a day to avoid carpal tunnel syndrome. It's easy just to get started assembling all the other parts needed for the seat. I've hung up all 16 pieces of welting, and you can see it's about 30 inches of fabric side by side. You must make sure that you allow enough fabric for welting, especially when it is cut on the bias, as it should be. Be sure to watch my video on cutting and assembling welting if you are unsure of how to do this step. The piece that was left on the bottom is large enough for 1 chair seat, so there is no wasted fabric. I'm sewing the bands together assembly line style, as it is faster to just keep feeding a new band under the presser foot after carefully backstitching at the beginning and end of each new seam. The edge to the right of the seam is strangely wide looking because I'm avoiding the selvage edge. I will trim it off, leaving my half-inch seam allowance when all my bands are sewn together. I put a piece of tape on each band with an arrow facing up to remind me which edge to attach to the main seat. I use a serger to serge all the sides of my seat pieces except for the welting. Since the welting is cut on the bias, it doesn't tend to fray. Think sergers are not commonly used in upholstery, but it's been important to me more times than I can count. For instance, outdoor sunbrella fabric is easily washed in a washing machine on gentle cycle, but the edges fray like crazy, even when you zip the cushion covers closed. The threads really want to unravel, and the cushions need to be repaired in just a few years as the seams give way. It's even difficult to zip the pillows closed when the frayed edges get caught in the teeth. I can't recommend the Baby Lock serger enough. It's not difficult to learn to use, and there are videos or even classes to take wherever you buy one. Finally, we are ready to put the seat fabric pieces together. On the top side of the seat fabric, I place the edge of the welting even with the edge of the fabric. The welting will give a perfect half-inch seam allowance as the cord is fed into the welting foot on the machine. The welting will easily follow each turn and curve that you sew as you keep the edges nicely lined up. Here you can see that I started stitching in the middle of the back, which sits between the rails. I wasn't happy with that placement and seam ripped out the stitches so I could hide the seam at the rails. Either way is acceptable, but this fabric was pretty heavy and I didn't like the bump it created as I attached the beginning to the end. Be sure to clip the outside corners of the welting with 1 or 2 V-cuts to easily bend the welting around. Don't be afraid to really manipulate the welting by overbending it in the direction you want to go. That way it will lay nicely when you line it up to continue sewing. The scissors I use are nice and small for using at my machine and are super sharp to cut perfect V's or wedges out of the corners. These scissors are by Karen K. Buckley. I sharpened them right after this first seat because they were a bit dull from usage. After that, perfect cuts. When I started stitching the welting behind the right rail, I was able to do a simple finish. The beginning and the end of the welting could be placed end to end because it's not seen behind the rail. That sped up my sewing time from about 30 minutes per seat to about 15. Time is money in upholstery. Here I am removing the welting from my first seat. I'm using the Karen K. Buckley scissors again. After many years of reupholstery, I sometimes have a problem with the step I have just finished. The welting slid sideways away from the edge, as you can see here, or you cut a piece too short, or whatever. I find the best solution is just to unstitch or recut or remove and start over. Band-aid solution or quick fix is usually not going to work, and it's faster to do a good job as you go than have the customer spot a problem in the end. If you have to spend hours and hours backtracking to fix that problem, it's not going to make the job worthwhile in the end. It was at this point that I decided to start my welting in a different place anyway and hide it behind the rails and simply butt the two ends together. When I reupholster slip seats on dining chairs, I want to hide as many seams as possible someplace where they can't be seen. On these seats, it is 63 inches all around. Since the upholstery fabric is usually 54 inches wide, it requires a second piece of band cut and attached on one side for the front band. We saw that already. I need enough fabric to equal the width between the back rails, plus a couple of extra inches for ease to slip the finished seat topper onto the new foam and dacron. You can see the arrow pointing up on the tape. This is the top of the fabric. With right sides sewn together, the band is attached and then flipped down. You'll have the nap or the direction of the fabric running the proper way. If you'll remember, earlier we sewed a short 15-inch piece of band to the long 54-inch piece. I'm placing the right joint seam in the middle of the back rail to hide it. I pin the band to the seat so it doesn't move when I start to stitch around the beginning of the 15-inch band. I won't join the band on the left side because I need a little wiggle room to ease the new finished seat cover onto the foam and dacron. Now that the seat covers have been constructed, we can move on to the foam and dacron. I'm using new 2-inch medium density foam for the seat. Here you can see me lining up the wooden platform long ways. This leaves me a good amount of foam left over on the side that can be glued together to create another seat cushion. Simply trace around with a Sharpie and cut out nice smooth edges with an electric meat knife if you don't have a foam saw. I've had an upholstery business for about 25 years, and I've always been using this electric meat knife. It's what I first started with, and I've never had to change. The knife easily removes for sharpening every few months, and it doesn't take up much room to store. I simply mark out the pieces I need with a Sharpie and cut squarely along the edges. If your edges are a bit rough the first time you try, you can get a foam shaver that is handy to smooth out the edges. Another way to make your cut pieces of foam go further by gluing two pieces together at the straight cut sides. Just spray a layer of adhesive on each side where you want to join them, wait a moment, and press together. I like to leave them to dry overnight for the best bond. This is the original foam seat. It has a second 1-inch thick piece in the center. The 1-inch foam helps to crown the seat, which just means that it pushes up the look of the finished seat ever so slightly and gives a little more softness. The spray adhesive that I'm using is from the company Sailrite. I found it is far better than other spray adhesives that I've used before. It almost looks like silly string when you spray it. It is low odor and bonds pieces of foam very well. I'll also use it to attach the unbonded dacron to the foam. Here I'm cutting out the 10-inch squares to place on the bigger pieces of foam. I've used my small blue square to keep the edges at a nice 90-degree angle in the corners. The secret ingredient to cooking may be love, but the secret to excellent upholstery is accuracy. We're at the final step of seat preparation. I'm using unbonded dacron and it's sprayed with the adhesive, and also the foam gets a light coating. This dacron, like cotton batting that upholsterers use in some chair applications, is torn by spreading your hands apart along the edge where you want to cut it. You can easily pull off the excess after it's all been secured. The idea of tearing it is to give your dacron a more gradual edge, much like layering a haircut rather than just cutting a blunt line. We'll also spray the edges to secure the dacron on the sides, and I will tear off any excess. The excess can be saved for an overstuffed style chair, which requires some pieces of cotton batting or dacron to be stuffed into the inner side rails or back rails for softness. Having a box of leftover pieces of Dacron or foam comes in handy for a smaller job, such as a child's chair. Let's talk about the supplies that we are going to use to easily attach the fabric to the chair seat. I use cardboard tack strips to temporarily attach staples to the fabric. Staples are easily removed if adjustments need to be made. It also protects the fabric when staples need to be removed. You can buy a box of the straight strips that are about 36 inches long, or you can buy a lighter-duty cardboard tack strip coil. I cut them 1 to 2 inch lengths because I only staple 1 to 2 staples in each piece. I made a rectangular piece of cardboard that is 2.5 inches by 5.5 inches wide. I write band on it so that I don't get confused with any other cardboard laying around. I run the cardboard along the welt line and to the bottom of the wood seat, giving me a perfect 2.5 inch band all around the seat. My pliers and staple remover round out the list, as well as a Sharpie and a regulator. Now that all of the pieces have been carefully prepared, we are ready to attach the fabric over the seat. I start by laying the wooden seat upside down onto the wrong side of the fabric. I take a piece of tack strip and place the cardboard band sign on the side and staple the middle of the fabric to the middle of the seat. You should have already marked the center point of each side of both the fabric and the wood seat with a small Sharpie dot. This gives you guide points that you should follow, and the rest of the fabric should easily lay between each dot. Because there is only a 1 inch allowance left to staple into on the wood, bulky fabric doesn't become an issue. Unlike most upholstery, there is not a lot of pulling and stretching involved with your hands. Just a firm smoothing of the fabric into place. You can see me moving around the seat, placing staples first in the front and tucking the Dacron gently into the band and measuring each time with the cardboard. I then move to the back, gently pulling as much fabric as I need to wrap 1 inch around the back to be stapled. As I said earlier, the cardboard tack strip pieces are only temporary. As I am happy with how the band looks on one side, I will staple close to the temporary places, securing the band, and then I will remove the temporary staples, throw away the cardboard, and staple straight into the fabric. This has protected the fabric through the whole way and makes it a much faster process. As I said in the beginning, I wanted to reduce the amount of staples used in this project. Who knows, you may be called upon to reupholster these chairs 10 years from now. Or especially if the project is your own, you'll want to try some new fabric later on. You'll be happy that the perfect amount of staples were used and it doesn't take you days to remove them. The advantage to serging the edges also makes the fabric more able to resist fraying and stretching as you manipulate the fabric around the wooden base. When most of the front and back have been secured, I match up the center points of each side, and then the rest of the side fabric can be gently smoothed out and secured along the edge. I tuck in the fabric at the back corners and cut off any excess. These seams will be completely hidden in front of the back rails. There, we're about done. Only 7 more to go. After installing all 8 seat pieces onto the foam pads, we would next attach the bottom welting before we added the black dust cover. Unfortunately, I didn't film this step. As you can see here, we carefully stapled the welting strip parallel to the edge. I like to guide the welting along the edge using my thumb and first finger to keep it evenly aligned all the way around the seat. I started and stopped in the corner in front of a back rail where it cannot be seen. There, another job we did earlier was to cut out new cambric for the bottom. Simply trace an outline of the wooden seat onto the cambric roll with chalk and cut them out. I like to use a roller cutter to cut out the shapes because it gives a nice smooth edge and it also is a lot faster. You can see now that we've replaced the cambric on the bottom of the chair using a minimum of staples. It's strictly to hold that dust cover in place. I've also maintained the chair number through the whole job. The last thing we have to do to the seat is steam it. Steaming is a great process that actually smooths out any lumps or wrinkles and makes the chair look professional. It's the best thing you can use, and you can use a handheld one or a garment steamer like I have here. It's best if you check on a small piece of scrap material to make sure that it won't shrink or discolor the fabric first. I'm showing this in real time because I want you to see how slowly you go across to get a really nice, crisp finish. This chenille loves to be steamed. Here we are with the seat finally installed, ready to deliver to our customer. Looking pretty sharp. Here's a close-up of the chair seat installed between the two back rails. You can see we don't have any seams in the back, and there is no welting joint at the top of the chair. Looks good. Here is the dining set all finished. The project took about 30 hours to complete. It was picked up from the customer and delivered and installed about 3 weeks later. She was very happy with it, and I was pleased with the overall look. I hope you enjoyed watching the process, and if you have any questions or would like to see something specific, drop a comment below. Until next time.